Welcome to the Battle Buddy Podcast with Keith McKeever.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Battle Buddy Podcast. I've been waiting for this day because I've got Jane Babcock on, and the amount of knowledge in your brain is unbelievable. We met on Clubhouse a handful of months ago. You're constantly in rooms talking about anything and everything claims and VA related and all that stuff. And you've got that unique perspective yourself as a veteran, but as somebody who's been a VSO, and so you know those inner workings, and you know from our seat, you put the veteran hat on for both of us. You know what that's like and the struggles and all that stuff. So it makes you, I'm sure people love going to you versus somebody. I'm sure most VSOs are vets themselves, but somebody who isn't, that can't relate. So without further ado, I've got Jane Babcock here. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about your story, Jane, your military story and how you got where you're at today.
Well, at the age of 23, I decided to follow the family tradition and have at least one person in every generation in the military. So came home, told Dad I was in. That was interesting because he has a harem, a wife, 5 daughters, and a bitch dog. So he did not expect the military. So I did 4.5 years active duty the first time. Had a great time, but I also had a great learning experience. I was electronics crypto repair and then went into installation work. So I had an offer for a nice paying job out in Washington, D.C., and I took it. And 11 months later, I went, I miss the people. So I joined the reserves. I was at... Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of work you can put up with because of the people. And there's a lot of work you can't put up with because of the people. So I did get activated for Desert Storm, went to the Pentagon, but a few days later they went, they're doing such a good job, you can go home. So I just got on the subway, went back to my old job and said, I'll see you guys tomorrow. But I ended up moving. Yeah, I ended up moving back to Wisconsin, got connected with a unit at Fort McCoy, military intelligence, switched to my third MOS, and I ran the schoolhouse administratively for the command and did all that. And then I came out as a recruiter here to Manitowoc. So I had a great time. At Fort McCoy, I was there May to September every year, and then I came here for 3 years as a recruiter. Then I went back to the reserves because anybody that's been a recruiter will pretty much tell you it sucks when it comes to family life. So
that's the perception I've always had. I've got a lot of friends that have done it, that are doing it or have done it in the past. And outside perspective looking in, totally agree with that. So I don't know how they have a family life, especially with the job demands and quotas and yes. It's not something I would have wanted to do.
But at the same time, it's great. You meet these young people with all these dreams, and they're trying to figure out how to get those dreams, whether it's college money, whether it's job training. For me, it was job training. 23, working in a factory, didn't know what I wanted to do. When I got out of high school, said, I'll save my money, and then I'll go to school. Yeah, that worked real well. Had lots of money in the bank when I turned 23. No.
Of course you did. Yeah, we all did.
Yep. So I went to the Army and got 1 year of training in, and they said, I said, what's the longest MOS I can get? And they went, well, this one, but you'll have to wait 6 months. I said, no, that's too much time. I might chicken out. So what's the next one? And they said, well, it's 2 months wait, and it's a year-long school. And I went, I'll take that. And that's how I became a crypto tech.
Yeah, our stories are kind of similar in some ways. We're kind of I was 21, and I felt like going through basic training at tech school, like I was the old guy. Like I wasn't the oldest one there, but like even in your early 20s, like you're still older than everybody else. You had some life experience, and it was like, wow, like the 18-year-olds, like you don't know anything about life. Not that I did at 21, but
yeah. But we have so much more experience.
Oh, so much more life experience, in those 2 years or 3 years or whatever. But
yeah. I stepped off the cattle car. The DI looked at me and goes, how old are you, Private? And I said, 23, drill sergeant. And he went, your new name is Mom.
Oh.
I was older than him. So
oh my goodness.
I became the Private Mom. Yes, drill sergeant. Go see if that's an Army problem. If it is, send her to me. If it's a girl thing, you take care of it.
I bet that happens more often than I don't know. I didn't have that perspective, but we did have two guys in my tech school class that had just, I'm trying to remember what the timing was. I think the cutoff age in 2006 was like 38, 36, 37, 38 or something like that for enlistment. And these two guys, one of them had just missed it by a month. One of them missed it by 2 weeks for their birthday.
You have to be able to complete your 20 years prior to your 60th birthday. So then they subtract off. And it used to be that you could go all the way up to 40, and then it was 35, and then it was, so they slide that rule up and down all the time.
Yeah, I think at the time it was like, I think they were like 36 or 37, which is funny because that's like my age now. And I look back on it, and I'm like, man, those guys were old and they could not keep up. Like, they passed the training and they were smart and they brought a lot to the table and they were our leaders. But they noticeably struggled when it came to the PT and keeping up and some of those things. And I look back and I'm like, man, they really struggled. And I'm like, I'm the same age now. I would look pretty ridiculous too if I was to enlist right now.
Just the fact that they had that desire to do it. But at the same time, when I was the CVSO up in Kewaunee County, I helped the county sheriff, had 4 years in the Corps before he became a police officer. And he said, I've often thought about the retirement because I was talking about my benefits. And I said, well, you're still young enough. You could do it. And he's like, oh, no, I can't do it now. And I'm like, wait a minute. You got to subtract 4 years off your age because of the 4 years you already did. He said, you have to hit your 20 before you're 60. That's all that matters. And he goes, I can do it if I enlist, like in the next 90 days. And he did.
Hey,
and he was, so he did. And like he said, at 60, he'll have health care on his family and a retirement check.
It's totally worth it. And a bunch of paychecks along the way. It all helps. So
yeah, with all the active duty time I have, my retirement check is somewhere over $1,500. I don't know. And, and then the TRICARE insurance. It's great.
Up, and that should be taken heavily in consideration when joining and when that reenlistment period comes along. If you're at that 10 years, I never got to the 10-year period, but I know that's a tipping point for a lot of people. Do you stay in and suck it up for another 10 years, deal with it, cross train, whatever, to get to that 20? Because those benefits are totally worth it.
And if you're active duty and you got 8 or 10 years in, switch over to the reserves. You can have the opportunity to pick up a new MOS. I've got 5 MOSs. So.
Did that ever make you? Did anybody in your chain of command ever just look at you and be like, "Well, Jane's on her 5th MOS. She'll know something about this." Did it get you extra jobs? Did it get you voluntold for things?
Oh yeah.
I bet.
I was voluntold to march in President Bush Sr.'s inaugural parade.
Wow.
Yeah, it was one of those, we need volunteers. It's kind of like when I was in Korea. They go, we need volunteers to take the urinalysis test. Hook, which was my maiden name, because they knew I wouldn't be hot. So
they actually asked for volunteers to go take?
Yeah, because it was so difficult to do large ones that they would take percentages of each unit on base.
Okay.
And run them through.
When I was I was voluntold to go to urinalysis.
Yeah.
I lost track of how many times it was, but I know in 5.5 years I went and peed for the government at least 20 times. And it was always funny because especially when I was in Japan, Miss Yumi was her name, and she, working in the command, and she would call. That's the only time she would call. She'd call my dorm room cell phone, and I pick it up. Is Mr. McKeever there? And his little soft little voice. And I'm like, yes, Miss Yumi, I will be there in 15 minutes. Well, how do you know? Because that's the only thing you call me about.
Yep.
Oh, man. I'm glad those days are over. That's not the funnest thing in the world. But, hey, you get used to the routine. You just knew every couple of months, for me at least, it was every couple of months, expect that phone call. There it goes. And I finally figured out after time, I was like, they're not picking on me. Phil, like you, I'm just the control, right? They got to test so many samples. I'm just the control, After I've after I haven't peed hot for 15 times in a row, I'm not doing drugs. So, it helped narrow
Yeah.
down the ones that are, I guess. I don't know how all that works, but never cared to know too much. But we talked a little bit, and we kind of jump ahead on one of my questions because we kind of talked about different generations of people. I'm kind of curious from your perspective, what are the big differences when it comes to benefits and stuff like that for the different generations? For younger guys like me, all the way up to the World War II guys, is there major differences that you see in issues or treatment or
Yes.
things like that at the VA?
Yes. Unfortunately, there is. In 1976, post-Vietnam, the VA's own numbers estimate that there was 31 million plus veterans. As of 2019, they estimated 19 million. So we've lost 12 million. Of those 19, only 8 of them are pre-Vietnam or post-Vietnam, pre-1976. So
Okay.
out of 31, there's 8 million alive. That leaves a lot of widows out there. A lot of them that never knew about VA. I look back and I go, gee, there didn't used to be a VA clinic 30 miles from here. And there didn't used to be the great big clinic an hour away. So they had no clinics. It's like the transition assistance program. I retired in 2004. I was on a 45-day training mission out in the high tech in Sacramento. We were supposed to be going to Afghanistan the next summer. And I was out there doing some skill strengthening training. And I was in a non-combat injury accident, line of duty. Basically ran into a pole and ended up blowing out a disc in my neck and tearing up my shoulder and breaking my elbow.
Ooh.
And I didn't realize it, that when I got back and within a few months, the progression of the loss of feeling in my arm and the pain in my shoulder and this, that, and the next thing, I finally went into a neurosurgeon and they said, oh, well, the only solution is to cut your neck. So this little scar that I have here, they cut me open and they took out a disc and put in a cadaver disc and put in some metal bracing and screws and stuff like that to put my neck back in alignment to relieve the pressure on my nerves that were making me lose my sensation in my arm. And I went to my unit and I said, I'm stoned on Vicodin. And I walked in, hey guys, I got to get my neck cut. They're going to slice my throat open next week. And they went, okay, sign here. You're in the retired reserve. So we're getting ready to go to Afghanistan and you've got 21 plus, so you're good. That was my transition. In fact, I didn't even turn in my field gear.
Jeez.
I did that months later.
Wow. Yeah, definitely a different time for many different aspects, but especially with the 2004. I mean, early in the war and stuff like that, and
the unit didn't know.
They really thought about transition and all that stuff. That's crazy.
Yeah, and the unit administrator didn't know. Granted, we were a very small detachment, and the unit administrator was kind of learning the job on the job. But there was no mention of VA, no mention of compensation. No, you can go to them and get your surgery since it was line of duty.
Wow.
There was nothing. No, not even. They didn't even mention the SGLI, VGLI thing.
So they just mail you your DD-214, and you just get it in the mail, and you're like, I guess it's official now. But
yeah, well, and the worst part about reserves, they don't mail you a DD-214 because you're coming off of a reserve weekend. There is no DD-214.
Okay, right, yeah, unless you're activated, right? Then they issue one when you're deactivated. Yeah, good point. Yeah, all right.
So I knew nothing. I missed, and then it was 6 months before they got me my retirement orders. So technically, I had my surgery while still in duty. I wasn't on duty status, but because it was line of duty, I could have asked for a medical review board to see whether or not I was fit for duty and stay in if they found me to be fit for duty, or be considered for medical retirement if I wasn't, because I had so much active duty. I had 8.5 years on DD-214s, plus I had a whole bunch of ADSW hours or days. So when it all got pressed down, my 21 years equated to almost 13 years of active duty time.
Yeah.
So because I crossed that magic 8-year number, I was eligible for medical retirement. Under 8 years, unless you are rated extremely high, say you're only rated at 40%, then and determined not to be fit for duty, then they offer you severance.
Okay, so what percentage then for those younger ones? Say you're in 2 years and you got a back injury, and
Right.
you know what percentage are they normally looking at before they cross that severance to med board?
It has more to do with time and everything. They will, if you ask for a med board and you have service-related injuries, they have to give you an exit exam and they have to decide what your rating is. A lot of guys are getting that rating anyways because they're going for their VA rating. Well, if your VA rating is high, go back and see if you're med board qualified, because what they look at is, obviously, if you have a 10% hearing loss, that does not stop you from being eligible in the military.
Right.
Okay. Say you have a shoulder injury and okay, so you're not going to be able to wear battle rattle, but that doesn't mean you can't be a radio operator at the top.
That's true. Yeah. There's definitely other
So,
jobs that aren't out in
yeah.
the field that won't require all that gear. Yeah. Same
Yeah,
thing
just
with, like,
because you're
gear,
rated
maybe a-
40% doesn't mean you're not going to be able to stay in. It just means,
have a-
do we have to look at you for re-rating? I mean, look at these guys that are losing a limb and staying in.
Very valid point.
So
Very
it's
valid
not,
point.
yeah, it's
That's something that was pretty
unfit
unheard
for
of more
duty,
than-
not disability rating.
Yeah, that was pretty unheard of more than maybe 15, 20 years ago.
Oh
You know,
my
and
God,
there's
yes.
a lot of people that have gone back on duty, and it's like, why can't you, right?
Right.
Can you sit there and work a phone, work a radio?
Yeah.
Can you still,
Can
learn
you
to
work
custom
in
use
an
radio cues and
electronics
work
maintenance
going
shop that's back in the safe zone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all know there's plenty of boring jobs that just require somebody to sit in a chair. Yeah.
True. I hate to say it, but it's hard for an airborne ranger to become a chairborne ranger, but
The Air
it's
Force always
possible.
has open knowledge. We welcome everybody in the Air Force. Anybody can sit in our chairs.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's how they determine. People will say, well, I've got a 40% rating from the VA. But if it's things like a 10% hearing loss, some issues with your ankle and maybe some issues with your shoulder or something, does that stop you from being a radio operator? They'll offer you that opportunity. Do you want to be retrained and stay in? Well, if you've got 12 years in, why not do the other 8?
Yeah, if you can,
or transfer over to the reserves, but stay in and get that retirement check.
If you can handle it, yeah. If it's something that you can train into a job where it's not going to be either detriment to the mission or get aggravated, anything could aggravate it, like an ankle injury, like you say, right?
Yeah, and then when
you might be able to hobble around with a brace, but if you're not carrying gear, you may not aggravate it, but you could also aggravate it going out for a regular run or walking in the beat and trip over the rug and aggravate it. But
and then when you do get out, then they're going to re-rate you. Okay. Well, yeah, you're now rated higher. Are we going to let you stay in till you're 30 years? Nope, we're not. So, at any point they may say, okay, now we're going to re-rate you. Well, now if they're going to re-rate you, it's odds are that they are going to be looking at med board and possible medical retirement. So now the difference there is if you are young in the years and not rated high enough to be medically retired at young in the years, then you're going to be looked at for severance pay. And basically what that is kind of a lump sum payoff, just like VA disability. That's what they used to do, is give them lump sum payouts, because very few people went to the VA because there weren't very many VAs. And there weren't a lot of people out there telling them about VA. there,
makes a lot of
like I
sense.
said, there was no transition 10 years ago.
Was that pretty common after the Vietnam War? I've met a few Vietnam vets that have not gone to the VA. And when you kind of ask them some questions, and I get it, it's been 45, 50 years, 45, 50 years, whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
I've heard these kind of, I guess I'll say excuses about why they never went in, or they were kind of offered something, but they didn't take it. Maybe because their job that they were going to go into had benefits, and so they weren't going to need it or whatever. I've heard a handful of different excuses, and I'm wondering if that's what happened for some of these individuals. They were offered a lump sum or something, and they
For part
turned
of
it
them,
down.
yes. But the other part is you're flying back from being in country, and your attitude is like, I just want to get these boots off. And they say to you,
And you may or may
okay,
not know what you're flying into
you can
either.
stay and we will give you a full physical. Oh, we've given you a physical, which consisted of somebody standing a couple feet behind you, whispering at you. They would go, hey, soldier, can you hear me? And if you said yes, your hearing's good. Check that off.
That sounds like an easier test to pass than the ones they have now. Those are so
Yeah.
confusing. But I won't go
Yes.
down that rabbit hole.
Okay,
I
yeah.
always
Does
second guess
anything
myself.
hurt? No, nothing hurts. Even though you're standing there with foot rot, jungle rot, they don't see it. They're not going to write it down.
Or you
And
weren't
you're
paying
not going to
attention
tell them because
when
you
you're
want to get those
limping.
boots off.
Yeah.
So,
I'll tell you
yeah.
anything. Just get me the heck out of here. I mean, that's understandable too. Like, just get me out of this country. I want to go back. I want to settle down, go about my life, and do my thing.
Yeah. And
You know?
veterans will sit there and say, well, why didn't the VA tell me? I'm sorry. Do you live at your parents' address? Because that's the one that's your home of record.
Yeah, it's just like going to a store, right? And let's just say the store offers a crazy 50% discount on products to veterans. Like, do you think they're going to really like make an effort to advertise that all the time? They're going to be proud that they offer it, but they're not going to like put it on every single wall because they got to make profit. Like they got a business to run. They have expenses to pay for. They have things. You know, the VA is going to be the same way. They're not going to tell you all the ways and all the shortcuts to
Yeah.
to get
And
you.
that's one of my big heartburns with the VA. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, then you'll see that a lot of times when VA does articles or when other veterans do articles about talking about benefits and stuff like that, and I'll say, yeah, and what about those 22 million veterans from Vietnam and older that are already deceased? Do their widows know that they're entitled to dependent indemnity compensation, or entitled to, most of them would be allowed to use the War Veterans Pension Program? But
They
in
don't know
12,
because the veterans don't know themselves.
right,
I mean,
exactly.
When I got out and I looked at the VA, I'm just like, I don't know. This is just so. And my stepdad's the one to push me towards it. He goes, "You got to take the records down there and go do this." So I did. And I'm glad I did. But when you look at it, it's overwhelming. Like, this
It
is a
is.
whole. This is a government agency. All these moving parts. I don't know what I need to do next.
Yes. And remember, when the Vietnam guys came home, they had no knowledge of what Agent Orange was going to do to these guys. One of my veterans, it wasn't until, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, they put ischemic heart disease on the list. Ischemic heart disease consists of coronary artery disease and arterial sclerosis and a couple other conditions. But he had his first heart attack before he was 30.
Wow.
Now, being that young and quote healthy, he recovered pretty good, and and then later on had a couple more. But by the time he was in his mid to late 50s, he had to retire. He had no choice. He was medically unable to work. But again, ischemic heart disease wasn't on the list, even though he had filed in his 40s. I think it was his second or third heart attack he filed. So when they did put it on the list, he came in and he goes, well, now I want to file again. And I said, for what? And he goes, for my heart disease. And I went, when did you file before? And he told me. So we immediately filed under the rules of financial hardship, showing that he had past due bills, he'd had a foreclosure on a house and things like this, and said, he filed a claim way back when. And they paid him $480,000 in back pay.
Ooh.
Because Agent Orange is the only cause of injury illness that is recognized under what's called the Niemer Law. A man with the last name Niemer fought the VA all the way up to the Supreme Court and won. And that was for the back pay of, hey, I was messed up because of you. It's not my fault you guys didn't agree that the medical evidence showed this. Yeah. And they went, you know what? You're right.
Taking a fight to the VA.
Yeah. It's no different than being shot. You messed me up because I went in service and you did something to me.
Yeah. You never know what's going to...
The enemy did it. We did it.
You never know what's going to be the issue. I'm sure there's long-term effects to look at refuelers. People working at fuel depots or working around chemicals all the time, or those of us from my generation
jet fuel's
around
a good
burn
one.
pits. I'm sure. What are the long-term benefits to that? We don't even know. But thankfully, that there's some fights going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank God for the Vietnam guys, because they know the system. They know how to fight it. They know what data needs to be collected. They know about the NIH and the approval board, which meets every other year on Agent Orange to approve new conditions and stuff like this. And then the worst part about it is they'll say, yes, statistically, it shows that the Vietnam guys are more likely to get this condition. But then it takes a couple more years for it to go through the congressional. So that's why, when I was CVSO, any Vietnam guy that walked in, I would go through the litany of all the conditions, and then I would say, okay, now, any other health condition going on? And they would tell me, and I'd say, well, it's not on the list, but we're going to file it. Well, if it's not on the list, why file it? Because if 5 years from now it goes on the list, guess what? They owe you back pay. One of my guys right now, he's fighting for blue water status. And if he gets it, which I believe he will, he's going to get back pay to when he and I filed for his cancer 7-8 years ago.
Wow.
He wasn't qualified then because blue water wasn't accepted.
I know that was a long fight, I think, for a very long time. And I'm glad that passed about 6 months ago, a year ago, something like that.
Yeah, like a year ago. But the worst part about that is, okay, I'm on a ship. I'm 12 nautical miles out. And we're sucking in water from the ocean to filter and then use for showers and things like that, mopping the floors and whatnot on the ship. Now my ship goes 14 miles out and a helicopter lands and discharges a guy that, puts a guy onto our ship from Japan or someplace. And he's not blue water, even though that ship is contaminated. Yeah. They didn't empty out the filtration system at the 12-mile mark. So the water still coming out of the shower heads is still contaminated. And the guy that had to climb inside the filter system and scrape the sludge off the walls, or the guy that had to climb on the plane that just flew back through a cloud of it and landed on his ship. Yeah. And yet, to make you really disgusted, C-123s were the favored distribution system for planes flying Agent Orange over. If you were a part of the Reserve or National Guard, National Guard units in California were the ones that were receiving the planes when they were damaged, they were cannibalizing them, and or when they were going to, put them in permanent storage.
Yeah, mothball that Davis moth them.
Yeah. So because 10 years later, they tore apart a plane to put it in the Smithsonian, and they went, oh, look at all this stuff that's in the crevices and the cracks and the little cubby holes. So if you were part of that unit, 10 years after Vietnam, you can still file an Agent Orange claim.
Wow.
But the guy that got on the ship that just spent 6 months inside the 12-mile zone, and because he got on it when they were at 12.2 miles, he's not exposed?
You're definitely exposed. Maybe to a lesser level, depending on how long you're on the ship, or but you're still exposed.
Yeah, you get on the ship, and the decks have been all washed with it and everything else, and your clothes that are coming out of the laundry And the shower you're stepping into?
You're probably there for at least a couple of days. So a couple of days worth of eating, drinking, bathing, walking around.
Yeah. And generally, when they dropped you on a ship in the Westpac, it was because you were a replacement for somebody. So you were going to be there a while. So
Oh, I
you're going
bet,
to tell
yeah.
me they're not exposed? No, you can't. You can't.
Yeah, they're definitely exposed. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that
But
about
the guy
that.
that never served active duty 10 years later in California could file for it.
Well, and that's unfortunately, and I don't like to badmouth the VA or anything, but it is the government agency, and you got Congress and laws and all these different things. It's a lot of moving parts, but it's a darn shame when things like that happen.
Yeah. It just takes a little common sense and a little willingness to do the right thing. But they're willing to vote themselves a raise. Why aren't they willing to vote to give our veterans what's due them?
Absolutely. My wife was just telling me today that I'm in Illinois, and the Illinois state legislature passed something. I can't remember what it was now. Oh, it was, a new state something or another, like state microbe. I think it was something like that. And I was like, are you serious? Like, they really spent their time debating and writing a bill to have a new state creature of some sort? Is this necessary? Of all the problems, the other problems,
Yeah,
in all the different categories you could think of, this is the one thing they put their time and attention into.
Yep.
This is sad. But it happens at all levels. It is what it is.
And look at the guys that are coming out of the sandbox and everything. You have to go through all this rigmarole and this stuff with breathing problems. They're just now putting those things on there, even though they've known for more than 10 years. Because you can't be exposed to that talcum fine sand that was blowing around in the wind.
Oh, that stuff was incredibly fine.
Yeah, and they sit there and they give an issue about burn pits. Well, it was, human waste is not good to inhale the fumes from and stuff like that. But the rest of it was like paper and this, that, and that. It's like, dude, what do you think they did with a piece of electronic equipment when it was no longer serviceable? They didn't fly it back here to the United States to be recycled.
Well, you can look at current events. Look what's going on, and I don't want to dive into what's going on in Afghanistan and all that craziness has happened over this last weekend. But the Taliban has taken over equipment, weapons, all that stuff. We left that. We gave that to the Afghan army. So, so that's a perfect example of we don't bring stuff back. We take it over there and we leave it. Because I know that the Air Force anyway, like if you're going to ship things from one country to another, you have customs issues when it comes to microorganisms and stuff like that. You have to deep clean those pieces of equipment before they fly or transported on a ship. That's expensive and time consuming. And why would we do that to vehicles that have been running and have hundreds or thousands of miles on them and they've been beat up? But it's just cheaper just to leave them over there and give them to the government.
Well, and like the crypto equipment and everything at the embassy. I don't remember what the name of it is, but there's these pads, basically. They look like a small book. And you put it on there and you let it rip. And it's an incendiary. It just goes right through all the equipment. But there's still parts of it left. But all that mercury and everything else that might be in any of the components, like I said, it went into the burn pits. It was incendiarized. People were exposed to that. Rubber tires in the burn pits, everything else.
Literally
everything that you didn't want the enemy to have went into those burn pits.
Yeah, it's not like they really had. Well, when I was at Balad, I was at the convoy gate in the southern tip. We had a crew that would go out with third country nationals and they would go dump garbage, but it was, I want to say like 6 or 7 garbage trucks, but there was like 30,000 people there at that base. Are you telling me that was not all the garbage? There was a lot more being burnt there, and they were going the opposite direction. But that burn pit, the Air Force housing area was, 5 days out of the week, downwind from it. It was just blowing everywhere. It's kind of hangs out in the air. But where the rest of that garbage was going, I don't know. I think it was mostly food garbage from the DFAC. Everything else was burnt.
Yeah.
Major theater hospital there, Balad. I mean, when you look at those lists, it's very disturbing, especially to know that you've been there. I've spent 14 months of my life in between two of those locations that are in the top 10, top 15 culprits for burn pits. And you look at it and you're like, that's just insane. I can believe it, but I can't believe the things that are burnt. Like you said, batteries, tires, chemicals, human waste, medical waste. I mean,
medical waste. Yeah.
Metals, plastics, everything is burned.
So, and we wonder why we have respiratory problems in our troops.
We were just talking about that before we went live. I was kind of just talking about my asthma and stuff, and it's like, I think probably all of us have some sort of something. I don't know of any places in the last 20 years of war that we didn't have a burn pit. I think almost pretty much every location had one, and I would argue probably 50% of the garbage at those locations was burnt.
Well, okay, here's another example of that. We, the U.S., are still remediating Agent Orange from the ground in Vietnam. We are paying for that.
Wow.
We are supervising it. And yet, we're not concerned with the long-term effects. Again, it's the 12-mile thing. How can you say that it disappeared off the ships or the planes or anything else that moved out 12 miles?
Yeah.
If they were inside that zone at any point and they took it on, it's there. It's just, give it up, guys. It's there. But you're going to sit there and say, oh, no, it disappeared. But we're still digging it up out of the ground over there because their people are still contacting the Agent Orange through their food and their animals and everything else.
Bigger question is what happens to that food with their exports? Are we bringing in any imports into this country that are coming from there that could be affected from that? Because that affects the potential, all the population in the United States.
Well, when you think about it, look how much plastic we are sucking through the air. The plastic fibers, our fish and everything else, there is no such thing as fish without plastic in it. There's islands of plastic garbage floating out in the ocean.
Yep.
And it wears away into the water, and the fish inhale it, and the fish digest it and everything else. And then we eat the fish. So it's just there. It's present. Now, can we look back at this and say, well, this is just we mammals and the Earth's evolution to wherever it's going to be 20 years from now or 200 years from now? Yes, but does that still mean we just keep going in that direction? Are we going to end up growing a third eye because of it?
One in the back of my head wouldn't hurt from keeping an eye on my kids, but...
Well, I told my husband when I die, bury me face down, because every 6 months I get Botox shots in the back of my neck to keep me from ending up in the emergency room from the migraine headaches because of the way they put my neck back together. So I have the smoothest neck. Not a wrinkle to be had.
Hey, that's a positive. Hey, gotta look at the bright side in life, right? Wow.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, the best looking neck for a 62-year-old woman there is.
Wow. I didn't even know you could do Botox in the neck. You're blowing my mind here. Botox in the neck and the Agent Orange 10 years later. Holy cow.
So if you're a veteran out there with a neck injury and suffering, or I really think that these are also related to the burn pits for some people, because you can't suck in all those poisons and not have issues with your sinuses and everything else. They're finally admitting the sinuses, but how many people are getting triggered migraines because of it? Well, if you're having lots of episodes of migraine, Botox is amazing. This last year I had one. Wow. I couldn't go a week with only one before.
Holy cow.
I was in the emergency room because they would start in the middle of the night. By the time I woke up, I was in the fetal position, dry heaving. So if you are suffering migraines, go talk to them about the different treatment plans through the VA. It's amazing what these guys have discovered and are using now and giving us as far as acupuncture, Botox, and other things like that. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's I don't know much about Botox, but that's an incredible transformation. Going from once a week and symptoms like that to that's incredible. And see, I was going to say, all we're going to be able to do is scratch the surface.
Yeah.
There's so many different things. Wow. That's why I loved it when we connected on Clubhouse, and I was just going to throw this at the bottom of the screen for people that would end up watching it, but they can connect with you on LinkedIn or Clubhouse. I highly recommend you do, because you got some great stuff that you put out there on LinkedIn. And in Clubhouse, there's so many amazing conversations that you're into.
Oh, yeah.
Ones I've been you into, or always join each other in rooms. Amazing information. So, that's where you can get a lot more of this very, very same talk about all these issues. And some of those, like, what's his name? Ray. I know he's a current, I think he's the Raider or something like that. I forget the exact job title. But when the two of you start talking about these things in Clubhouse, it's just like, wow, sit back and just listen, because you're going to get the truth, the real story of everything that's going on, and you don't have to read between a bunch of lines on some boring government regulation paperwork and try to decipher it yourself.
And the VA is so much. You guys that did luckily get transition TAPS or whatever you want to call it, you learned a little bit. You learned that there was a VA healthcare system. That you learned that you were eligible to use it. You learned that there was a thing called compensation. And that's about it. If you were awake to hear the class.
Yeah.
But did the VA hand you the federal handbook and say, this is the book that covers the general understanding of every benefit from VA healthcare to the funeral flag? No, they didn't. But yet they have millions of them in a warehouse. They didn't do that.
That's a great place to put it.
And with military service being generational oftentimes, I mean, my dad, my grandfather, skip a generation and then 3 more generations back, all served in the Army. If I had known years before my dad died what was eligible to him, he wouldn't have been spending over $1,000 a month on medicines.
Yeah. It's crazy what the VA can do for you. I had a neck issue, non-service connected, just had tightening in my neck earlier this year, and I went in, they said, yep, those muscles are extremely tight, let's go to physical therapy. They sent me there, went, I don't know, like 8 different appointments. They gave me a neck traction device and a little electronic thing. It's got to be $2,000 worth of stuff they just gave me, and then I can kind of just do treatments at home if it kind of bothers me. And every handful of nights I'll put the electronic thing on, man, just really massages my shoulders. But it's like, that's one of those things where I didn't even know they really made anything like that. And I definitely wouldn't have went out and spent $800 or $1,000 on one myself. I would have just popped some pills and just dealt with it. But you go and get those treatments and get the help. It's amazing what they can do for you.
Oh, I know this hair looks terrible. I didn't expect video. I thought this was going to be just a recording for podcast.
Oh, you look fine. You look fine.
Yeah, well.
But
if you have hearing loss, or if your grandfather served and he has hearing loss, go to the VA. The hearing aids will cost is $100. 99 times out of 100, most veterans over the age of 70, their income is going to be low enough after they subtract off their out-of-pocket medical expenses, like their Medicare and their supplement and all that stuff, that they're going to get the hearing aids for free. Hearing aids, glasses. Yeah. Come on. There's no reason for Grandpa to say, what'd you say?
Yeah, he also doesn't want to. I mean, it's got to be legitimate hearing loss, not selective.
Exactly. That's what I tell my guys every time I went to the VA, I got my hearing aids. It's great. I said, yeah, no more selective listening.
Yeah, I got a buddy locally here, and he'll be like, hold on, I got to turn it off of wife mode.
Yeah. Yep.
Cracks me up every time he does it. It's hilarious.
Yeah. And it's incredible, the quality. And I have veterans that, because like myself, my hearing loss is not service. Mine is natural progression. Mine is low tones. Most noise-induced hearing loss is from the high tones, which is why you guys have a hard time hearing us women. But because mine was low tone, I had a hard time hearing you guys. So especially when my veterans would call me on the phone, I struggled big time with the phone. But now you get the hearing aids that can Bluetooth, or you get a little gadget that goes on your phone, and then
That'd be the craziest thing for Bluetooth, because I got these like little cheap little earbuds that go with my Android phone, and I'm like always popping them in, popping them out, and be like, I mean, I don't want to have hearing issues, but I'm just saying it'd be kind of cool if it was just automatically connected all the time. Just hit answer, and boom, it's already in there. It's probably a lot more comfortable than the earbuds all the time. But
and the first time I went to church with them on, I walked into the church. I didn't know they had this thing called a loop. So it's a Bluetooth system that you will find in conference rooms and everything else. But I walked in, and all of a sudden I heard this click, and then I could hear like 10 times better.
Wow.
And it's the same thing at conferences, large conferences. I'd walk into the conference room, click, all of a sudden I'd be able to hear the speaker up in the front of the room that didn't realize that they were on a hot mic.
Oh, I bet that is interesting from time to time.
Sometimes.
Yeah. When people don't know the microphone's on. I mean, I'm not going to lie. When I was being a cop, we had radios all the time. I was probably caught on a hot mic a few times.
Yep.
I think everybody in my career field was. But I was gonna ask you, since we're kind of talking about the different claims and stuff, what's the best way to prepare? So you go into your VSO, you fill out all the paperwork and everything. You got the exam, the CMP exam, right? What's the best way to kind of prepare for that? Like paperwork wise, mentally, all those things. I know it's kind of a stressful thing to like going into a building you don't know. You're sitting down with somebody that you haven't talked to yet, and you're trying to explain things. You got to prepare yourself. Obviously, you got to go in and tell your truth, your information. But how does somebody prepare for that the best way?
Well, the steps I used to use as a CVSO, I would always ask veterans, what branch did you serve in, when did you serve, and where did you serve? Because that could influence what you might have been exposed to. What was your military occupation and stuff? So think about exposures. And then think about injuries, and think about, well, I jumped off the back of the Deuce and a Half. We were on a convoy from Camp Anaconda to someplace else, and I was supposed to be on Anaconda, but my ankle swelled up, and I was at this other base for 2 days. By the time I got back, well, you don't go to the TMC, so that's where your buddy statements, your witness statements, your spouse that talks about, he used to play softball on Wednesday nights and he had to stop because his ankle kept rolling out on him and stuff like this. So think about those things ahead of time. The VA looks at any injury or illness caused by or aggravated by service that is a chronic detractor from the quality of life and has a current diagnosis. So if you haven't been diagnosed yet, you can't claim PTSD if the guy with the big certificate on his wall hasn't officially declared you as having PTSD.
About putting it in your medical records, after some sort of
right. You can go to the vet center. You can go to a counseling center. Vet centers are great because those are all combat counselors, but they can't do an official diagnosis. So what they're going to do is send you over to the behavioral health guys over at the VA, who are then going to look at all their notes. They're going to talk to you for a little bit, and they're going to say, you know what? I agree with your counselor. I'm officially declaring you as having PTSD. I'm the guy that can prescribe medication. I'm the guy that can diagnose you. I may not have seen you until today, but based on the notes of your counselor at the vet center, so a vet center is often a good place to start because it gives you that opportunity to talk to A, another combat veteran, and B, that sense of, okay, you're not just here to write a prescription for me.
Yeah. I don't know if I ever told you when I called for the very first time, mental health, right? Being as transparent as possible. When I called last year and I was like, look, I need to talk to somebody, got some issues going on. And the first thing that the person asked me on the phone is, do you just want medicine or do you want to actually talk to somebody? And I was like, what kind of question is that? No, I want to talk to somebody, right? I want to talk about my feelings, whatever, and all these different things, whatever. But like, I was really set back by the whole comment of, do you just want medicine? Like, no, like, I get it. Some people do. Some people just want the pills. Like, they just want whatever, right? but it just seems so wrong that that's the first impression.
Yes.
But I blew it off. I'm like, okay, you know what? Maybe it's just that person that day that I caught, whatever. But it was really kind of upsetting because I knew like I was not in a suicidal state or something like that. But I knew that there were some things in my past that I like, you know what? It's time to talk to people, work some of these things out. But my mind went to somebody who's on the ledge, who has just waited way too long.
And gets a smart ass comment like that.
That's very troubling to me. That's the kind of thing that keep me awake at night, just knowing that happens to some people, and that's a fork in the road. You're going one or two directions. You're either going to end up going the direction you want and getting the help, or they're going to go on a downward spiral, and we all know where that ends up. That ends up in the statistics book.
Yes.
And
words have an amazing power. They can help and they can hurt in a heartbeat. And that kind of response tells me, okay, the person on the other end of the line obviously is not military.
Yeah.
And probably has not suffered a lot in their life where they might consider that you need somebody to talk to. And besides which, you walk into the clinic, they're not going to prescribe you meds on the first time unless you have a history that they can look at. And unless you've maybe had medication before. But even then, they're going to ask you questions. You know, what's going on? What are your symptoms? Let's talk about this. You know, very few doctors are going to risk just dropping a drug on you that might interact with something you're already on. And,
absolutely.
You know, have you standing on a cliff that night.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely. A lot of things can, you know, I think you had mentioned that in the clubhouse room. Kind of a side note on that is, you know, you should really look at all those prescriptions they're giving you and talk to the pharmacist about, you know, are these going to interact in a bad way?
Yeah.
You know, there's side effects on the side of pill bottles for a reason.
Yep.
And when one or two may seem
and there's a reason why they give you that little paperback book every time you get a new drug or get a med. So
you mean the one that ends up in the garbage and nobody reads?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know? I mean, you kind of do blindly trust it. It's a sad fact of just being a patient in a medical setting. If you just kind of trust what they give you is fine, but that's not really the doctor's specialty in knowing the chemical makeup of those pills. And
no, it's not. And it depends on the doctor and the clinic.
Yeah.
I've had guys come here from other states, from other VAs, and they're taking 12 different drugs, and they're saying how, you know, they take 8 in the morning and 4 in the night. And I said, are you hungry for breakfast after you eat those? But
you put some
then they go to the doctor here, and I say, look, you need to first talk to the pharmacist. Oh, and then find out which ones are harmful to potentially interact, because maybe that's what's causing your symptoms. Maybe that you complain that you have ants crawling on your skin all the time. Well, guess what? It may be a nerve thing going on with the meds that you're taking that's making you feel like your skin is crawling. Or absolutely. That may be causing you to have the GERD. Maybe if we switch you to this medicine, it won't interact with that medicine and you won't be like hot pipes all the time.
I was just going to go there. You know, I think not a medicine expert. What is ibuprofen or Tylenol? One of them, if you take it too many times, it can cause ulcers and stuff like that. And obviously that could lead to all kinds of issues along the digestive tract. Like you got to think about those things. That's why when I've gone to my doctor, I'm like, you take anything for it? And I'm like, no, I really don't like to take a lot of those like traditional painkillers because I don't want my stomach to get messed up. Or I'm not an addictive personality, but like I would take one here and there, but after a handful of days, like, okay, we got to treat the problem instead of just treating the pain, you know. Right. And so let's figure out what, like my neck, I waited way too long on that. And they're like, you taking anything? And I'm like, nope. And they're like, okay, well, start taking some whatever it was, kind of relax the muscles a little bit. And I'm like, okay, since you said so, like, goes against my nature. I really don't like to. Matter of fact, I threw some ibuprofen away out of my medicine cabinet the other day that was expired already, and it was 3/4 of a bottle. Like, I was like, okay, I gotta go get rid of this, dispose of it properly, or whatever. But I was like, that's how infrequently I take it personally. But you gotta know what all those things are and treat your body right. You know, you only get one body. It's not like you can go to the store and pick out a new one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I had a guy come out of the Wounded Warrior unit out in Colorado, and they had busted him twice out there because he failed to show up at formations, and they caught him sleeping during duty. I mean, his duty basically was sit and, answer that phone if it rings.
Yeah.
But they had him on so many drugs. They had him on drugs to help him sleep. They had him on drugs to help him wake up. They, and it's like, okay, this is a young kid. He got here, and the first thing the doctor did was say, okay, we're going to wean you off all these. And within 2 weeks, he was off half of his meds.
Wow.
And he goes, oh my God, I'm actually awake.
Just look at Sudafed. I mean, that Sudafed will knock a lot of people out. You can take that for allergies. You just take the wrong thing, and it can just have that effect, like sleeping on post.
Yep.
There's a reason in Air Force Security Forces, those that go to the nuclear field on the PRP status or whatever it is, I was never that, but like there's virtually no medicines they're allowed to take because it could make them drowsy or whatever. And obviously we can't let our nukes fall into the wrong hands. That would not be, to say that's a disaster, that would be a disastrous understatement. But there's a reason why they don't let them take hardly any medicine, like nothing over the counter. Like, you got allergies, tough. You're probably not going to end up there.
Yeah.
That Zyrtec or that Sudafed or something like that's going to knock you out, and that has potentially terrible ramifications for yourself and the world.
But if you're on the outside world, if you're a veteran already, and you're taking a lot of medications due to super messed up joints and everything else, and mental health issues and whatnot like this, and GERD because you're taking so many medicines, then you shouldn't have to pay for those if it's because of your service. And even if you do have to pay for them because it's non-service connected, you shouldn't have to pay full price. So, and if you're living low because maybe you've been laid off from work because of COVID, maybe your income is reduced because you're not laid off, but they've reduced your hours or things like that. Or maybe you're in treatment, so you're not working. Well, you can go to the VA and say, this is my income minus the out-of-pocket medical expenses that I'm paying for my wife and kids. Oh, you have a family of 4 trying to live on this much money? Well, that's below 130% of the poverty level. So we're going to give you your meds for free. You're only rated 40%, so you don't get the free meds. Oh, but maybe we should be re-rating you. Oh, now you're 50%. Now your meds are free. So there's a progression inside the VA's healthcare system. If you retire, your income changes. Go back to the VA and say, I want to take an income test or a means test. And they'll say, okay, what's your income now? Well, last year it was $60,000, but this year, because I'm on Social Security, my wife's on Social Security, it's $50,000. But I'm paying for Medicare, and I'm paying for supplemental insurance, and she's paying, God forbid, COBRA. You know what? Your income is actually only $20,000 after you take off all those expenses. Oh, you're going to get free health care. Free, we can't do anything for your wife. She's going to be on COBRA, but until she's 65.
Every little bit helps, though.
But now you're going to get those free glasses and free hearing aids. And
yeah, $100 pair of glasses is, and I don't know what hearing aids cost, but that all adds up. And your eyesight can change every, couple. It can change pretty rapidly, but you get that free glasses this year, and you get them free 5 years from now, and that's $200 worth of glasses, let's say, and $1,000 in hearing aids, or
$5,000 in hearing aids.
Whatever the costs are. That's
and maybe that CPAP machine. That BiPAP or that CPAP because you snore like a Mack truck. I'm the snorer in my family. But I'm the one with the CPAP machine too. And you know what? My husband spends all night sleeping with me and not going into the guest bedroom.
That's worth
it's wonderful.
There's nothing like snoring to cause issues in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was telling you earlier, I've already had that sleep test. Maybe I need to get it again because I'm a snorer too. I mean, I'm just over there. I'm chopping down the whole rainforest in the night, and like breathe right strips have made a difference. My wife even said that. I've been trying them for like a week, and she's like, "It's amazing. It makes a difference." She goes, "It's not gone, but
Yes.
it's manageable."
And remember, if you're snoring or you have episodes of not breathing, your breath isn't the in, then the out. If it's stopping, then you're depriving yourself of oxygen, which means that your organs are all being deprived of oxygen. Your heart is an organ. If it's not getting the oxygen it needs, it will let you know one day when you grab your chest and fall to the floor.
Yeah, it's a kind of essential thing for life. It's
Yeah.
and that would be scary too. I mean, because I don't know that you really know. I mean, until you go get tested.
Right.
Especially think about all the single veterans that are out there and don't have somebody that's sleeping in the bed next to them, and
Elbow them.
yeah, to be like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, you just stop breathing for like 30 seconds. Like I could hear it, But if you don't have that somebody that can look after you, that's kind of scary. It's kind of like gambling with your life in some ways. Let's say
Yes,
like
you are.
Russian roulette, but like you just never know when your time's going to be there. So
Yeah, and you
it
don't want to be
really,
falling asleep behind the wheel and alcohol hitting you twice as hard as it should, and next thing you know, you're getting a DUI and blah blah blah. So
and that's how things spiral out of control. And once
yes,
again, bring it back to the elephant in the room in the veteran world of suicides. Like those are the kind of things that just kind of evolve back into playing a factor in those kind of things. So,
yep,
which is a shame. But you
yeah,
did say something about like the medicine, and this will transition to another question I have for you because I feel like this is one place where they've done a great job. For me, the pharmacy has been amazing. I go in and see my doctor, says I'm going to prescribe something, and it's either go to the desk and sign in, it's ready in like 10 minutes, or they just mail it right to my house. And in refills, they make it really easy. You just go online. I mean, maybe if you're technologically challenged, it may not be the easiest, but it's easy for me. I just refilled some prescriptions the other day, and it takes a few days to get there. So plan it out before you run out. But it's easy; just comes right to the house. It's amazing.
Well, and one of the tricks that I was taught by the pharmacist at my clinic, you go online, you order a med, and it shows up at your house. He said, go back online and check the box. They won't refill it until it's X number of days down the road. Now that comes, go back online, click your next refill. Oh, gee, I'm going to be out of refills. Now I've got a month and a half to get my VA doctor to refill my meds. And it may be that he's going to have to see me to refill it.
Interesting life hack there. So it just automatically puts in the system you want it, and then after that 30-day period or whatever, it just tells the pharmacy to fill it, and it that's a clever way to stay up on.
So that way you stay ahead on them. But it also allows, if you're anything like me, sometimes you kind of forget to take certain meds. And so you get a little ahead and you're going, oh my God, they just sent me another bottle and I still got half a bottle of this. Well, then don't refill it and wait until you're getting closer. But, or your doc, you can call your doc and say, hey, you can go online and just say, doc, I'm having more and more issues with my GERD, and I'm having hot pipes at night and getting muscle spasms in my esophagus when I lay on my stomach. And he'll say, okay, up your GERD medicine. So, you're taking it morning and night. Okay, fine. Well, now I'm going to run out of meds faster. But he can turn around and make that change. And the next thing you know, bam, here's a new bottle of meds.
Yeah.
So it's great having that online.
That's a neat trick. I like that.
Yeah. And it's good for us.
It'll last for a while, but
yeah, it's good for us. But what's our 77-year-old veteran who can't hear on the phone anymore because he doesn't know that he can get hearing aids?
Oh, yeah. And so that's why I was going with this question, because I was going to ask you, like, in your experience, where has the VA really had a success in the last 10 or 15 years? Like, where have they just knocked it out of the park, and where have they just come up short?
There's been a lot of advances in the VA as far as getting on registries, like the burn pit registry.
Yeah.
Get on the registry, get on the Agent Orange registry, get on all these different registries they have, because then they send you newsletters of updates, changes, new additions, or they start watching patterns that are happening in you guys. Because you're on the registry, they're going to look at, okay, you had your blood testing. Gee whiz, we got this pattern of guys that seem to be having issues with liver enzymes or something like that. And maybe we need to look more into that and see if it's a specific base or if it's the general population at that generation that were overseas. Okay, so they've gotten better in that sense, and they've gotten better in the technology use. But at the same time, because they're sending us messages, text messages and calls and everything else about our appointments so we don't forget them and things like that. Yes, I know.
Oh,
But
I don't know how many times for every single appointment they send me a text message and a phone call. It's like I already replied yes 35. I hate that. Why whatever, and it's a different number every time. It's like I just replied to this yesterday. I'm going.
yes, and that's good for us. I'm 62.
Oh, we just lost the video there. All right, we'll see if she pops back in. Address some of the live comments on the show. Frank, good to see you made it to Ohio. And Brian, I will pass that along to Jane when she comes back in. We'll see what's going on here. I'm going to go to a short break here. Oops. Oh, we got you back. Can you hear me all right? Can you hear me all right, Jane?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Go figure we're talking about technology, and and technology gives us a headache here. Can you hear me all right?
Hey, Keith, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
It's not going well.
Can you hear me now? It'll be like a commercial on TV. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Talk.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Okay.
All right.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's
We were
all
having
good.
such a good time. I didn't notice that my power was draining on me.
Well, you couldn't hear me there for a second ago, I don't think, because I was like, oh, that's how ironic. We're talking about technology in the VA, and then technology fails us here for a second.
And sure enough.
It's always something,
You know, but
that's why you were
that's the
talking earlier.
problem I have with the VA right now. That's my canker sore with them, is that in 1976 we had 31 million veterans. Today we have 19 million veterans. That's a $12 million veteran loss, 12 million loss. Of those 31, only 8 are still alive. So we have 8 million veterans over the age of 65. Many of them suffering the side effects of the type 2 diabetes, the ischemic heart disease, the 38 different cancers that come with Agent Orange exposure. We've got the Korean War veterans who had issues with frostbite and things like that. A lot of prisoners of war during those times. So they have malnutrition issues and everything else. And of course, the tropical diseases. And then you have the World War II guys with the radiation and other things like that. Very few of them have survived to this age. But the VA is on the internet.
Yeah. And
how many of them are
as great as it is for me and you?
Yeah.
Those that are technologically challenged. I mean, I've got a good friend. His name's Gene. He's 95, 96, something like that. And he's surprisingly on Facebook. And, he can navigate tech pretty good for his age, I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
But I highly doubt he's taking advantage of the VA's technology offerings when it comes to filling prescriptions or sending a message to your doctor. I mean, I had to do that the other day, right? I couldn't get somebody on the phone, and the phone system's so annoying. I got a slip of paper for an appointment that I thought was a video chat, and is like reading like it's in person. I'm like, what the heck, And so I couldn't get anything, so I went in there, clicked the right clinic, and I sent them a message. I'm like, can you clarify, like, is my appointment on the 16th or the 20th? and where is it at? Because I have it in my schedule both ways. Like, you're telling me it's this day, I have it this day, different formats. But it was awesome. Cleared it up. I didn't have to worry. Well, I worried for 5 minutes trying to get somebody on the phone. Then I was like, screw it. You know what? I'll just go into My Healthy Vet and send them a message. It was 4, 5, 6 days before. I was like, they'll respond to me in time, and I don't have to worry about the phone system. Because it's a pain in the butt.
Yep. And it's great for us. But if we're talking about a veteran that's in assisted living, or God forbid, a nursing home, or he's in the middle of cancer treatments, his mind is not on that stuff.
Yeah.
Whether it's military, service related or not. They're not too many of them. Yes, there's some great 90-year-old wizards out there. But too many of them are, finding it difficult to operate a jitterbug phone, much less a smartphone.
Absolutely.
How does this thing work without a cord on it?
It's and hard to see everything and too many tools and stuff. And I get it. I mean, every generation's different on that. I mean,
and what's it going to be like when we're older? I mean, when I was a kid, I used to watch the Jetsons and think, you're going to be able to have telephone calls on TV? And yet Skype's been out there for how many years?
Oh, it's been out there for a while. Yeah. Well, maybe they'll teleport us to, like, my actual hospital's like 3.5, 4 hours away. And maybe they'll just teleport me there. That'd be a heck of a lot better than driving.
Yeah.
I don't know if I
Yeah.
trust the. I don't know
Or
if I
you could
trust the
just,
VA teleporting me.
you'll put on a cap that sends messages. You don't have to talk. You just think.
I don't know. That could come with some pros and some cons too for some people.
Yeah, that could.
That could backfire.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that could backfire.
But
Hey,
and that's why
better
people
insight.
get all upset about privacy and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, they've got your name, your birth date, your social security number, your address, your work history, your legal history, and in case of all of us veterans, our DNA. You can't give up much more than that. They
the government pretty much
practically
knows
know
everything
what
about
color
us.
your toilet paper is, so don't worry about it.
Or if you have toilet paper based on your social media posts last year.
Well,
Hopefully they got
you know
hopefully got some by now, but
yeah, you got 1 billion people over here, and you got 1 million people over here that are doing all the listening in and the checking people out. Well, if they've never heard the name Teeth, or if they've never heard Jane Babcock in reference to any other major criminal and or terrorist, why would they listen in on my phone calls? Now, if my name gets mentioned on a phone call with one of those guys, then they might start listening in on me. You know?
It all goes in the data algorithm somewhere and picks things up. But
Yeah.
There's so much data on you out there these days, and we willfully, put our information out there, like Facebook. I mean,
Yeah.
Facebook is in the data game. They don't really care about your social connections. They just want the data on you because people are paying them to promote advertisements in front of you and all that stuff. But I mean, it's become a part of our lives, and we willfully give them all that information on all these social platforms. Me and you met on Clubhouse. I can't tell me Clubhouse isn't collecting data.
Well, and the other issue I have is, it's not just the veterans that are losing out. The generations that are not having children. Okay, you're reducing the population. So therefore, and we just lost a whole lot of the population. But anybody over the age of 65, anybody that lives in Bayfield, Wisconsin, or, Partyville. I went through Partyville the other day. I couldn't get a cell signal, much less internet, Wi-Fi, or any of that kind of stuff. So we're leaving behind a whole section of the civilian population too. Not only our elderly, but some of our younger too. Look at the problems they had with school when they made everybody go to homeschooling. How many kids didn't have internet, and yet that's where they were supposed to school?
Yeah, no, I think for some people they had no choice.
Financially.
Like in the school district that we have my kids in, we kept my kids home all last year, and thankfully I could financially afford to bump up my internet speed because I was doing video chats in here for work, and they're doing them on their school thing, and we really had virtually no interruptions, and it's smooth. But then that there's some families that are struggling to the point where they can't financially do that. It's just not feasible. Yep. And even though they wanted to probably keep their kids home and protect them, they needed to go work, and they couldn't be there to watch them. So they had to go to school. They had to potentially expose them. They had to expose themselves unnecessarily. And that's a shame, but it's a reality for millions of people in our country and abroad. Yeah. They just got to do what they got to do. But that older generation definitely gets left behind when it comes to technology. Probably more so than, because you're a few years older than me, I would imagine the generation before the World War II generation, the World War I generation. I have a hard time believing that there was as many nursing homes and assisted living facilities. As far as I know, from my limited perspective, is those people would come home and stay with family members as they age. So they had the social connections. When my grandmother passed away 8-9 years ago, she was horrified to go into a nursing home. She would prefer to have stayed at home and not really be mobile, and maybe go to the local restaurant once or twice a week and have social interactions versus being stuck away like a prisoner while there was people around to talk to. It was people she didn't want to talk to. It was not, you lose those connections, and unfortunately a lot of people go in those facilities and people kind of forget about them. They just kind of end up there and nobody visits. They're not really included in the family things and it's a sad reality, but I think technology makes it even worse because they can't operate the technology, whereas the young people might have 5 minutes where they can pick up their phone and say, all right, I'm going to go FaceTime grandma and grandpa in the nursing home. Well, grandma and grandpa probably don't do FaceTime.
Well,
that's how the kids would meet with them.
And if the place, helps them with it, but even if that's all they learn to do is hit the FaceTime button, my daughter was out in Virginia at that time, married with 2 kids. And I would have her put the computer on the divider wall between the kitchen and the living room, and I would watch the children play and talk to her. So that was great for grandma to see her little babies. But like you said, we've almost gotten to the point where now we're keeping people alive to the point where we're putting them in little storage boxes.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's incredibly scary to me, somebody my age, to think that at some point in time, one of my boys would just throw me in some place and just leave me. Now, I'm ornery enough that I might cause some headaches for some of the staff there.
Oh, no, because then you'll end up in one of those memory care centers or one of those, ornery people centers where, you don't want to do that.
No, okay.
But they didn't have assisted livings. They didn't have senior livings and things like that when I was a kid, because that's what you stayed at home until you weren't safe anymore. And then you came and you lived with your family, just as they do in the Asian societies, just as they do in Afghanistan and Iraq and stuff.
Oh, true, yeah.
But your family generally lived within 20, 25 miles of you. Now they live all over the country. And most people, I hate to say it, but a lot of people live to the breadth of their income between credit card debt and mortgage debt and car debt and all that kind of stuff. And maybe they can't afford to have mom come live with them because they're not going to be there 24 hours because they're both working full time. When my parents, were younger, they could take care of grandpa and grandma. When my grandparents were older, my sister fortunately lived near them, but she had to figure out how to sneak over there at lunchtime and drop off laundry and pick up laundry and, coordinate grandma's pharmacy and everything else like that around her working schedule.
Yeah.
So we've lost the ability to support our families. I think that's part of what drives young people nowadays to say, do we want children? My son doesn't want children, and I'm okay with that because, like he said, Mom, we're crazy busy as it is, between the 2 of them working 2 full-time jobs. And for a while, his girlfriend worked a full-time job and a part-time job.
Gotta figure out what works best, for you. But you definitely have a good point when it comes to finances. We've talked a lot about like the medical side of things, but there's a lot of financial aspects to go into this stuff too. Putting your claim in and getting compensated for the physical condition you found yourself in, physical and mental condition, post-service because of the things they did to you or exposed you to. But I'm sure you see it a lot in groups too, like on Facebook groups and stuff. That's one of the reasons I created this podcast, was not just PTSD and claims, but transition and personal finances. I see people all the time in these groups just begging for help because they're like, I need a job, I got let out, or I didn't really have a plan when I transitioned out, and I'm broke, or divorced, and I'm broke now. And there's so many issues that affect the veteran population. It's, same things as others, but certain things kind of make it worse. When you've got physical or mental issues that, I joke around all the time with my knees. I've got knee strain in both knees, and I don't think my knees are 36-year-old knees. My knees to me are like 60-year-old knees. Like, I should not limp around or slowly get up off the floor like I do. Like it is what it is. Our bodies take a heck of a beating, and we age a little faster in some ways.
Yeah, and we live with a different mindset. Like you said earlier, you trust the doctor to be writing you the right medication. It's like when your commander walked in the room and said, okay, guys, this is the mission we have to complete by this amount of time, and these are the assets we have, and move out. You trusted him to have those things there for you. You trusted without question. Well, you come home and you walk in the door and I'm the king and I'm in charge and this is how we're going to do things. And your spouse is going, wait a minute. I haven't seen you for 8 months or 18 months. And I've been running the checkbook and I've been running the household schedule, and you can go sit down on the couch.
Yeah.
And then ask me permission to do something.
I think of like to this day when I came back from deployments or whatever, they give you like 2 weeks of downtime. At least the Air Force was doing that. And it was like, I reflect on it now. Back then it was cool because I was young and single. But I reflect on it now and I'm like, those married people, like, you need to come back and spend that time with your family and friends. But that was probably too much time for some people, too much of an adjustment. I'd argue make them come back and like keep them busy all day. Like let them go home for a couple of hours at night, unwind, let that spouse kind of do their thing and transition to back whatever that normal looks like, your chores and things like that. Like I really think that was probably a problem for a lot of married people. I don't know. I didn't live that life, so I can't say I have firsthand knowledge of it, but I can only imagine coming back from the war zone and then you're stuck at home for 2 weeks. Like your spouse has been doing everything for, like you said, 12 months, 15 months, 18 months. And then now all of a sudden you're just going to sit at home like a bump on a log. Like you're going to want to get up and go do something, but they're going to be like, no, this is my job. You'd be better off.
And
like,
maybe she couldn't get 2 weeks off.
Exactly. So you're better off just going and doing your job and slowly transition. Maybe give you an extra day off this week or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is, but I think back on it now and I'm like, ooh, that could have been problematic for a lot of relationships. You know,
you got to transition. The mid-tour leaves. I don't know about you, but I watched a lot of people. Our unit was used to frag other and support other units. So they would snatch a couple from us and things like that. And okay, we need some mechanics, this. And so our guys would go the first tour, they'd go over and they'd come back on mid-tour, and then they go back and they come back and they go, I'll never take a mid-tour leave again. Because they'd come home and the spouse has her routine. Maybe she doesn't have time off from work because she's given it up to take the kids to the dentist and the doctor and everything else. And he walks in and he's like, okay, I'm in charge and we're taking the kids out of school today because we're going to go to Disneyland. And she's going, no, you're not.
No. Kid got soccer practice that day. You can't do that. They got soccer practice. The other kids got band practice. And no, totally.
Yeah. And maybe there's no money in the checkbook. And you're going, wait a minute, you just had all that money sent to you while I was overseas. No, she's paid the bills.
Paid off your debt and all that stuff. Paid off that 35% interest rate Mustang that you bought when you were young and single.
Yes. So, you just can't come in and like the king. It's not the way it works. And she's mad because you're doing that. And she feels like the kids are against her now because Dad said we're going to Disneyland. We can't afford it. I don't have time off. The kids have these obligations at school, blah, blah. And so now she's the bad guy. And 2 weeks, things have kind of calmed down. The guy's not so hyper vigilant. And then he's snatched out of the family again. And the kids are going, no, Dad, you can't leave. And now she's got to deal with upset kids and you're off in the sandbox. And maybe you're not paying as close of attention as you should because you've had 2 weeks to decompress and you get hurt.
Yeah.
Or you do something that causes somebody else to get hurt.
This is darn good points. I never really thought about that because I didn't have but that would have been very difficult because I knew when I was in, every time I came home, God bless my mom would throw a party for me. Even if I hadn't even if it was like in between my deployments and I just happened to come home for like a 3-day weekend because I was stationed at Scott Air Force Base, so I was only like 3.5 hours away, 2.5, 3 hours away. If I came home for a weekend, my mom was like, okay, party. We're inviting all your aunts and your uncles and your cousins. And I'm just like, I just want to chill. I just got 3 days of leave. I just want to sit in the living room and play some video games and maybe hang out with my friends one night. I don't need a big party. Bless her heart. It was fun. But it's like sometimes you just kind of want to chill and you don't want to do all those things. But I can only imagine coming home after maybe 6 months or maybe 9 months, coming home for 2 weeks to that, and then have to put yourself in the mindset of going right back. I think you'd be better off doing what they did more in Vietnam and just kind of let guys feel like Thailand or something for a week or two. Blow off steam. You're in a different environment. You don't have all those family pressures. Drink till you're silly. Party. Hang out with your friends. Hopefully, don't do something stupid. Add to the population or subtract from the population. But kind of unwind in some way, but then go right back. That'd be hard to come back to a family. I'm very, very thankful to this day that I never had to deploy as a husband or a father. I got back from my second deployment, met my wife right after that. So had a few training things here and there, but it wasn't normally gone more than a few weeks. And so I'm very, very lucky and very thankful for that. I know a lot of guys, men and women can't say that. They've had to leave their families and do that transition.
Yeah. And then we wonder why these families have such a hard time communicating.
And divorce rates are so high, and it all plays a big factor in this grand scheme of issues. That's why I said, we have the same issues as civilians do, but we have unique situations that make them worse. They aggravate certain things. Civilians have marital problems, yes, but civilians don't have a loved one that's gone away to a war zone and seen and done unspeakable things for the last 6 months or a year, and then comes home for 2 weeks and has to be like, oh, happy, cheerful dad is back or mom is back. The world is all right for a minute, but it's not. And then the children get to see their...
Yeah, especially these guys that deploy 4 or 5 times. You deploy once, and you come back, and they throw you a big band party. And then you deploy a second time, and the party's smaller. But by the 3rd or 4th time, there's no party, but you're coming back with 4 times as much anger. Or 4 times as much stress, or you're coming back and finding out that your wife doesn't live there anymore. And, and then we act surprised. But yet previous wars, Vietnam and earlier, there was no 2nd and 3rd deployment unless you asked for it. If you're in Vietnam and they said, okay, you've got a 2-year hitch and you're going to be 6 more months back in the States, or you want to spend 3 more months here and we'll eat the other 3 months, you can get out early. Okay, so you stay a couple more months in Vietnam, maybe. Or you decide to re-up and they say, well, that's probably lead to another tour. Yes, but I know that.
Yeah,
or I volunteer to go back. Some guys volunteered because
I've heard stories of guys went to Vietnam 3 or 4 times. Whoa.
Yes,
but
how
many times you can roll the dice on that one.
They re-enlisted and everything else. So unless you're making a career of it, you're not going to go but once. Well, if you're in the reserves for 6 years, you'll probably go at least twice. If you're in the National Guard for 6 years, you'll probably go at least twice.
Yeah, there's definitely
but maybe more than that.
And what we do now versus what we done in the past. You go back to World War II, and those guys are just kind of totally different war. I mean, they're in it to win. I mean, you're in it. The stakes for the world are, and that's why it's World War II, right? The stakes for the world are,
Well, my dad went over and he got done. My father and my grandfather and father both served in World War II. My grandfather served in World War I also. And my dad was over there for, I don't know, 1.5 years, almost 2 years, and war got done. And he sat in a warehouse on the dock for 3.5 months doing nothing and waiting to come home because they were waiting for a berth on a ship.
Yeah, that's a lot of people to bring back. But the other thing about World War II is those guys had an opportunity, many units anyway, you would maybe rotate to the front lines for an operation or for a few weeks, and then you would be relieved by another unit and come back, and you had an opportunity in terms of mental health to unwind a little bit. You had, I'll say, relative safety. Obviously, you had aerial threats and bombardments and stuff that could happen, but you had an opportunity to tone down. In Korea, maybe a little bit like that in some ways, but Vietnam, you're pretty much, the guys were at these little fire bases and stuff in the middle of the jungle, and there never was a downtime. You had a threat from attack no matter where you were at, pretty much in country the entire time. You're there for 12 months, or maybe they said 13, 14 months, 15 months if you extended or something. But in the war on terror, you're deployed maybe 6 months, maybe 18 months. But same thing, you're surrounded by it all the time. You can't get away from the threats. If you're in Iraq or Afghanistan, at least, like it's just constantly around you every single day. The threat of indirect fire, whatever, just driving down the road, IEDs.
Yes.
There's
And
no
the
way
enemy
to
can
cut
be
that switch
miles and
off.
miles away from you. Whereas in World War I, World War II, if there was artillery coming, you knew about it ahead of time because it was such a lumbering effort for them to get the artillery near you. And then the rest of your battle was usually, where you could see the enemy in his eyes. In Vietnam, they couldn't see the enemy at all. They could go into the Ville and they didn't know whether or not the Asian fellow that they were talking to was combatant or friendly.
Just like, really in our wars, who's your friend, who's your ally? There's people around you all day you just don't know.
And look at how many of our guys got taken out in the sandbox by people that were supposedly friendlies that had a pass to be on base. So
or the Allied army, I guess the Afghan army or Iraqi army or whatever, and well, we know after this weekend's events where they
that was not a thing we could ever end gracefully.
No, but
yeah,
it's a darn shame that like I said, we're going to go down that rabbit hole. So
yeah, but we need to change subjects because we're getting awfully close to politics.
Yep, absolutely.
We may be in agreement with our politics, but that doesn't mean we should have that discussion on.
So we kind of covered successes and failures. So the one last question I had for you, because we're kind of talking about mental health and stuff, there's some secondary issues. Mental health is the one I know a little bit more about, but I know other issues can have secondary issues like PTSD. You could have, like you said, GERD. You could have irritable bowel syndrome, other things like that. So what are some major things that have secondary things that people might not know about? Maybe other than PTSD or some things, or how do you kind of handle that in the claims process?
Okay. So we talked a little bit about sleep apnea and the deprivation of oxygen from your organs and things like that. Sleep apnea leads to all sorts of other issues during the daytime as far as sluggishness, not thinking clearly, perhaps, falling asleep at the drop of a hat, things like that, anger issues and depression and all that. So those are part of sleep apnea. For our Vietnam guys, they go and they develop type 2 diabetes early on in life. And the next thing you know, they've got neuropathy, they've got retinopathy, they've got kidneys shutting down. Now they're older, they've gone through all those things, and now they're having depression issues because they had to retire early at 62 when they wanted to keep working because they needed to keep working to finish paying off the mortgage, and now they're so financially strapped. And they're having all sorts of emotional feelings about anger at themselves and anger at the system and anger at the government. And so
that's understandable to be angry.
Yeah.
But how do they deal with that in the actual claims process? How's that actually filed and things like that, or looked at by the VA?
Okay. So if a veteran files, say, for depression or anxiety related to PTSD or to type 2 diabetes, long-term illness, things like that. Maybe they've been through some cancer treatments that were service-connected and stuff like that. Well, if that counselor says that, yes, that depression stems from the feeling of failure and everything else because he had to retire early or because he's feeling like a broken man at 62 when he should be a healthy man at 62, getting ready to enjoy his retirement, then they can say, okay, if 51% of the likeliness, the VA looks at it as likely as not. They're putting things on a scale and they're saying, which side is heavier? If the side that says it's likely to be related to service is just that little bit heavier than the not likely to be service, then the VA has to go in favor of the veteran. So the evidence doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't have to be precise. A lot of times CVSOs or veteran service officers will ask their veteran, go to your doctor and get a letter that states that this is related. The doctor thinks you're saying, I want you to swear on your oath that it is related. No. That letter needs to say as likely as not. The scale is in favor, is balanced. He can't say yes or no because he doesn't know exactly. You know, he can
Right,
only
and
make
doctors
the
don't
best
like to
guess.
go on certainties, so,
Right.
a lot of
But the
things can
VA
present as one
rule
thing or another.
requires them to lean in favor of the veteran. So if that scale is balanced, then they're saying it's 50% that it caused by. So, or at least aggravated by. So the rules of aggravation apply. Okay, yeah, 6 years ago you lost your mother. You probably had some depression then. But if now that depression is so much more severe because now you're feeling like at the age of 65, I have 3 brothers. They're older than me. They're much more active. They're much more happy. They're much more this, that, and the next thing. And that's where I should be because I've led the same life in the same town, doing similar jobs. And the only difference is I went to war. We went through the family traumas and everything else together. And they're handling it well. And I'm going to counseling because I saw too much of death when I was a young person. And I couldn't do anything about it. And I couldn't do anything about my mother's 6 years ago. But now I'm seeing my own death coming much earlier than it should have been.
Yeah, that'd be a weird headspace to be.
Yeah. And no 38-year-old should be thinking that way.
No.
But there's a lot of them that are.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, just depending on what your situations are, and they can vary so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, so the best advice then really is to just examine those issues and talk to the doctor about it and kind of figure out what's secondary, what not.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because
but at the same time, don't expect the doctor to connect it while you're going. If you haven't had depression issues, and remember, depression, anxiety, and all that stuff, those are symptoms of PTSD. But if you suddenly going through a lot of depression, anxiety because of your PTSD, and you start developing irritable bowel syndrome, guess what? Your body is a very complicated machine, and it will react to the stressors and hormones and endorphins and everything else that are running around inside of you during those episodes. And the end result might be that your colon starts spasming. And now you've got bathroom issues. Or one of my guys had a problem called dysphonia. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it right. But when he would have really traumatic episodes of anxiety because of it, his vocal cords would tighten up so much he couldn't speak.
Wow. I've never heard of it, that happening.
So, and I've also heard of, it starts with an S. But anyways, what it basically amounts to is syncope. You get so stressed out, people will pass out because of what's going on emotionally, and it'll be a trigger to the syncope. You get lightheaded, you start breathing too fast, your heart rate's going too fast, and you're sucking air like crazy, and you get lightheaded. Well, some people will get so lightheaded they'll pass out.
Holy cow. Learned all kinds of new stuff from you, Jane.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
And believe me, when you're a truck driver, that's not a good thing.
When you say it, it makes so much sense. Like, okay, I can see that happening. But I never before this would have ever thought like you could get that stress like that would do that. But that's
why guys will say, well, I should be rated higher for my PTSD because I have this many nightmares and stuff like that. Well, but if you're coping other things well, if your day-to-day life is coping well, your marriage is solid, your relationship with your kids is pretty good, maybe you've talked to your boss and now you kind of work off by yourself so that life is going okay for you right now, then they're going to look at that. Each level of rating has a different standard, and it's a progression of your symptoms. Well, if you're at the point where you're having syncope issues, or you're having IBS, or things that are going to affect your ability to leave your home and go to work, then yes, you're going to be at that 70% rating, which
I
is
was
the
just going to say
point
it's
at
about
which,
70, isn't it?
yeah. And they're not going to put you at 100% unless you're in resident care. But they will put you at 70%, and then you can say, look, I need you to look at me for individual unemployability. I can't leave my home when I'm having these 2 or 3 weeks of bathroom issues, and I'm good for 3 weeks, and then I'm right back at it for another 2 weeks, and then I'm good at for a week or a month. So they can look at those things and say, yes, you're right. You are unemployable. The way the VA looks at employability is if you have one condition, say ischemic heart disease for Agent Orange guys, you're rated 60%. A, no employer's probably going to touch you. And B, there's very few jobs where you're going to be able to get to the work without driving. And you probably shouldn't be driving if your heart is that bad.
Yeah.
And
Everybody else will think you're going to stay off the road in that case.
yes, and you're probably taking a lot of meds and side effects and all that other stuff. So they're going to look at you and say, is this person able to have gainful employment? If you're working 1 day a week, or volunteering 2 4-hour shifts, that's not gainful employment.
Absolutely. So with that, do you think, because we've noticed in this last year, I'm kind of wrap it up with this question, but this last year, Zoom chats and all these things, people working from home, do you think the VA is going to, I kind of hope they don't, but do you think that they will adapt their viewing of work differently going forward? Because people can work from home, they can work on their computer, they could do things and be closer to those, and more jobs are kind of going that way.
Yeah, and they can, and that's an advancement that technology is good for. But at the same time, if you're sitting in a room doing a lot of Zoom chatting and your personality traits, because of your anger, because of your anxiety, you can't be in the middle of a Zoom meeting and get up. That's a half-hour meeting.
Sure.
And get up twice to go use the bathroom.
I would say you probably shouldn't be taking the camera in the bathroom.
Even on a Clubhouse, you don't do that.
Yeah, etiquette on Clubhouse there. Yeah, I think I've heard a few people doing that. But
So yeah, it's still going to have. Yes, they probably will take into account that kind of stuff. But you have to remember, there's only certain jobs. If you're a landscaper, can't do that on Zoom.
Yeah.
Truck driver, any of that kind of stuff. Crane operator, the guy that does the shipping and receiving at the factory. That's right now. My son is laid off because they can't get the parts. He just got laid off 2 weeks ago. He was laid off for a couple months and then went back to work after they put in all the, distancing, whatnot at work. But they just shut down 2 lines. They can't get the parts.
Yeah, if you don't have anything to work on, you can't work on it.
Yeah.
So a lot of problems there, but
yeah, so there's a lot to take into consideration in today's technology. But if you were smart enough to go into service and your ASVAB score was great and you've managed to pick up a college degree while you were in, or a technical certificate in something or whatever, then they're going to look at technology and its ability to provide you a job. But then they still have to look at, can this person sit still for 40 hours a week and do the things that he needs to do to maintain that job?
right.
And if you are temporarily rated as unemployable, say you had to have a couple surgeries, you got to do a lot of physical therapy and all this other kind of stuff, and they say, okay, you got your rated at 80%, you're going to be out of work doing all this physical therapy, so we're going to rate you IU for the next 6 months, and then we're going to look at you again. No, he's still doing physical therapy another 6 months or whatever. Then at the end of that, they say, okay, you're ready to go back to school. Through voc rehab, you could go in, or you could go and actually they will help you find a job. Voc rehab is much more than just learning life skills, like the guy that's newly blind, or going to college. There's a job track program. There's a program to help you if you're looking at starting your own business. Maybe you want to have a barbershop. okay, these are the things we need to do to draw up that business plan so you can go to the banks, so you can talk to the real estate person and, do the things you need to do to establish your business. Those are all part of what they used to call voc rehab. Now it's vocational learning and
I think everybody still uses voc rehab as to describe it. But I actually looked at that stuff because somebody had asked me about that because I'm using my GI Bill right now, and I'm 3 steps from the finish line on my bachelor's degree. But I wanted to educate myself more as just a veteran and a podcaster on it, and I was really amazed at some of those things, like the business thing. I was like, wow, that's really cool, and it's really good to know that if real estate ends up not working out for me, hey, I get that in my back pocket. If I wanted to go do something else, whatever that would be. But there's a lot of cool stuff because I had that singular vision of this is just education benefits because I had met other vets at school that were using it, and that's all I really knew about it myself. And so as I started looking into it, I was like, wow, there's some really cool programs here that you don't know about until you get 15 pages deep in the VA's website or deep in the blog section of somebody's website or something like that.
Right. And you also need to check your state benefits. Here in the state of Wisconsin, you finish that bachelor's degree on your GI Bill. We have our own state GI Bill.
Is that like
so now you can go for that master's degree.
Yeah.
Or if you are rated 30% or greater, your family can use it.
Wow. See, yeah, and things are different. I tried giving somebody some advice once on Facebook, and I was like, well, maybe Montgomery's good to go. And I kind of said it prematurely because I needed to step back and realize I'm in Illinois. I enlisted in Illinois, returned to Illinois. They have the Illinois Veterans Grant pays tuition at all state schools. And so then you got
if you lived here,
on top of it, it's like icing on the cake.
Yeah, if you lived here in Wisconsin and you're not rated at all by the VA, but you entered service in California, you live here for 5 years, you get it.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah.
So that's why I tell folks when they're getting ready to transition, you're going to take a job in St. Louis, which side of the river are you going to live on? Because maybe it's a better idea if you live on the other side of the river and you add 15 minutes to your commute or half an hour to your commute instead of, 10 minutes. Now you're commuting 40 minutes. But if you get 4 more years of college education, maybe you should think about living in the other state. So, never just assume that where you are is going to be the best. I know when I first became a CVSO, I had just finished using my state GI Bill, which only paid 50% of my tuition at that time. But in New Jersey at the same time, they got $75 a month or $75 a semester toward books. Do I want to live in New Jersey? No.
Yeah.
So look too outside of where you're going, where your landing zone is.
Well, that goes into the plan everybody needs to have when they leave, and I said it, I think I've said it once or twice on this podcast, that the plan you have when leaving the military, that should start the day you join. Because I don't care, you're either in for maybe a couple of years to get injured or 4 years, 8 years, 20 years, 30 years. Your day is going to come. You're going to get out, you're going to retire, whatever. And even if you stay for 20, you're getting out at 38, 40, maybe 45, depends if you join later. You still have an extra 20 years of your life left. You have a whole nother career, you have a whole nother life. You need to plan appropriately for it.
Yes. And you need to think about the long term, because with service being generational, if you find out that there's a benefit that's available to you, is it available to your older generation, your uncle, your second cousin? And spread the word.
You need to know what's coming down as well, and that's why I'm a proud member of the VFW and the Legion and stuff. And when I get their newsletters, it's awesome. That's kind of where I get a lot of my updates on things. And it's nice to know. Like, I don't know that much about it, but like the Forever GI Bill, like some things like that. I was like, that's really cool. I mean, it doesn't affect me. I'm the generation before, but it's nice to know for this newer generation that's coming out. Hey, you guys get that? Like, that's awesome. That's amazing. Like, take advantage of it.
I'm going to pitch right now. I'm going to pitch. I am on LinkedIn. Jane Babcock, real easy to find, Veterans Benefits Educator. Hook up with me. I will send you the links to all the significant parts of the benefits that I teach. And that way you'll have, oh, she said something about home loans. I remember, go to this link. There's the brochure on home loans. There's the 4-page booklet on home loans. There's the 4-page booklet on vocational rehabilitation. Oh, my aunt just died and my uncle served in Vietnam. Is there anything that'll help him? Well, he has that funeral bill to pay for that year. And if his assets are below $120,000, his liquid assets, not his home and car and personal belongings, but so now he's got this significant debt. Well, he paid for the funeral 10 years ago. Yes, but we get to bring it forward to the year that they actually used that benefit, used that funeral plan. He might qualify for war pension for a year, wartime pension, not on top of compensation, whichever is the better benefit. But if he's only receiving $300 and some in compensation and he's suddenly eligible for $1,500 from the pension, switch him over to the pension for a year, then switch him back to his compensation.
Absolutely.
So, yeah,
there's
there's all these working ways. And if you don't know what pension is, it's eligible to both the veteran and the surviving spouse if the veteran served wartime. So that's why a VSO is so important. VSOs have to train, test. They have to sign an ethical statement. They have to get cleared by the VA, and they have access to the system. And then every year they have to attend training.
There's no other way to go about it. I could not imagine 10 years ago when I got out, going to the VA website and finding whatever forms I would need, right? Because that would just be a disaster in itself. But finding all that, trying to go through the process, nobody has the time, the patience, any of that to go through that process themselves. That's why you need to go to a VSO, and you and probably hundreds of thousands of other VSOs out there, people who are doing the job or have done the job, they have that knowledge, they have the information. Use them. Don't try and struggle through this yourself, or don't go to, and maybe some of these are good. I know there's companies out there that you can pay and they'll get you your rating increase. They're going to take a portion of it. Just go to your county
never
VSO,
pay
your
for a
local
service
VA,
that's free.
Never exactly.
And remember,
because they're going to
person
expedite it or whatever. Nah, they say they're going to do that, but it's a crock. It's just I don't know if I want to use the word scam, but in a lot of ways it may
it's
work.
a service that they are willing to offer.
That they're
just like a hamburger. You can go to Wendy's or you can go to McDonald's.
Absolutely.
But the VSO is most of the time they're a veteran themselves, or they have veterans in their office doing the same type of work. And if you're working with a county one or a state one, you have easy access to their boss if they're not doing a good job for you.
Absolutely.
And if they belong to an organization and you move to another state, and the county or state one gets cross-accredited to the organizations, like I held 5 of them when I was a CVSO. So if a veteran walked into me and he just moved here from Pennsylvania and he said, "Oh, I'm already claim rep with the VFW." Okay, sign a release saying that specifically my name and my office are allowed to see your file and act as your representative from now on. They'd sign it, we'd fax it in, and or now they scan it and or they send it electronically now. It's just like signing at a bank.
It's a real quick, easy process. I just went through it, not.
Yeah. And I could look in the electronic network and see in the VA, here's your file. Yep, here's all the evidence. Oh, they scheduled you for an exam last week and you're no longer in Pennsylvania, and that's where they sent the letter. So we need to call them and tell them your new address and telephone number and to reschedule, because you're not going to drive all the way back to Pennsylvania for your exam.
Right.
So we would do those kind of things. That's where a VSO, they can see things right away. And you walk into that VSO office and say, they found a spot on my lung. You now have a terminal diagnosis. Give me a copy of that diagnosis. We send it into the VA. Their claim is going to be expedited. From the
That's
desk.
good to know. I didn't know they did that. That makes sense, but that's good to know. I mean, because that's going to affect a lot of people.
Yeah,
You know,
and they have access to the VA's email system, which has all the telephone numbers, so that, I would find
ooh,
people
that's a
in VA
win-win
and be
right
able to
there.
go, hey, Brian, you work in publications, logistics. Can you get me a box of the
That's a
VA
win-win
federal
right there, because
handbooks?
we all know the VA and phone numbers and getting somebody on the phone is a difficult task. So if they got the connections,
Yeah. We had their extension numbers.
Yeah, you'd have to jump through 15 minutes of hitting 4 on your keypad.
Exactly.
Yep.
Or we could just type them out on email, and,
Absolutely.
So
So
use your
people gotta
VSO. They're there. They're paid.
use your VSO, and I correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the VA has a list of all where you can find them. I think you can put in a search and things like that.
Just
I got mine around
with
about
me on
way
LinkedIn. I'll send it to you.
But yeah, LinkedIn. There you go.
That list I send out has that VSO list on it.
Absolutely. If we leave this with anything for anybody, if you're on LinkedIn or if you're not happen to be on Clubhouse, find Jane on there, and myself.
Yes.
I'm on there too. Find both of us. Connect with us. If you can't find Jane, send me a message and I will pass it along.
Ask just about any veteran on LinkedIn or on Clubhouse. Where's that VA lady? Oh,
Yep.
Jane.
I
Shy,
have put you
I'm
in some
not.
rooms because of it. When people are struggling, they need that resource. I've seen you jump in those rooms, listen to 5-10 seconds of somebody's problem, and boom, you're like, okay, here's who you need to talk to. Here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to tell your VSO. Whatever.
And this is the evidence you need to gather.
Absolutely.
And if you are in media, be it television or radio, and you have a family member or you are yourself in it, please connect with me. The VA is only on the internet. They have all these wonderful colored brochures that are in the lobby of their regional buildings, which are locked up because of COVID. You can't go in them.
Nobody goes to them anyway. You go to your little.
So how the heck are our veterans going to learn anything? I keep poking the VA, and I know the acting undersecretary personally. And I know all the assistants to Secretary McDonald, and they all know me. So believe me.
All right, Jane, keep poking the bear. Just keep going.
I am going to poke that bear.
Let's do something.
I end all my messages with, who's going to make it to TV first? I'll bet it's me. I don't have to be on camera, but I'll be more than happy to tell you what the veterans need to know, and your reporter can put it out there.
Absolutely.
Or I can get on a radio show like this.
That's where that's where the information gap is, and that's one of the reasons I want to do this podcast, was to talk about all these issues, particularly this one, but all these different issues, and just another avenue of getting the word out about benefits, whether it's VA benefits or it's a college benefit for some school or some information somebody picked up along the way, the College of Hard Knocks, right? And they learn this that way or the other way, and they want to pass it along so some other vet can listen to it and be like, oh, I can do that too.
And I'll be happy to send you the links that you can turn around to send to the next guy.
Absolutely. We got to share.
Exponential growth.
We'll leave it at that. I'm gonna drop you in the back room, but I'm definitely gonna leave it at that, Jane, because we have to work together. Because who's gonna look out for us except for us?
Exactly.
We have to work together.
We are a family.
Absolutely. I mean, my kids, honestly, when I talk, like, if I say something about, hey, I got a brother in trouble or I got a sister in trouble, whatever, they know I'm not talking about my blood sister. They know I'm talking about my brothers and sisters. There's been times on Clubhouse where people have been having problems and they're like, Dad, why are you still on the phone? I'll mute and be like, I got a brother or sister in trouble and they need me right now. They need somebody.
Yep.
And so if it happens to be me or happens to be somebody else, then I'm going to stick with them until it sounds like they're getting the help that they need or going down the road. But we got to look out for each other, because the VA is not necessarily looking out for us. I hate to say civilians aren't looking out for us, but we're kind of out of sight, out of mind. We're, I don't know, percentage wise, I mean, they say 1%, but I think it's more like 5-6% or something of the population has served or something. But we're a very small percentage no matter what. And we got to look out for each other. If we don't, nobody else is. So
Right.
anyway,
Yeah.
drop.
I hate it when they all say, "Oh yeah, we're pro-veteran." Well, what are you doing to show that?
Absolutely. Is it all talk?
I've got a way to show it. Connect with me.
Absolutely. All right, Jane, hang on for a second, and we'll wrap this up.